The 2023 NFL MVP race is one like we've never seen before, and in today's video we're going to discuss the current top candidates, who I think should be in consideration for the award that is not, and why this year feels a bit weird in regards to the MVP. Now, since the NFL started handing out this award in 1957, it has largely been won by quarterbacks. Out of the 67 years, 46 of them a quarterback has won it, including the last 10 years. You have to go all the way back to 2012 when Adrian Peterson won it for the Minnesota Vikings, in a historic season when he came within 8 yards of the all-time rushing yards and a season record with 2,097. And before Peterson won it, 5 years prior, it was once again all won by quarterbacks. And that streak would have likely been longer if it weren't for the historic seasons in back-to-back years in 2005 and 2006 from Sean Alexander and LaDainian Tomlinson. In 2005, Alexander rushed for 1,800 yards and broke the single-season record for total touchdowns by a non-quarterback with 28, but it was broken the very next season by LaDainian Tomlinson, who had 31. My point being, really since the beginning of the 2000s, it's taken a historic season from a non-quarterback to win this award, and I think it's possible we see a few non-quarterbacks have historic seasons in the NFL this year, but then the question becomes, is that still enough to win the award in 2023? And really that's because in the last decade, the NFL game has drastically changed in the terms of offensive football, and the quarterback position has gained even more value than it's ever had. And how fans and even the media view quarterbacks in today's game has played a large part in the MVP award really shifting to simply a quarterback award in the last couple of decades. This is currently the longest streak in NFL history with a quarterback winning the MVP, as Mahomes won it for the 10th straight time for a quarterback last season. Now, the two most debatable MVP debates of the last decade have to be Aaron Rodgers and J.J. Watt in 2014, when Rodgers had a good season with 4,300 yards, 38 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, while J.J. Watt had 20.5 sacks himself and an interception, carrying the Texans to a 9-7 record after finishing with just 2 wins the year prior. And then as recent as 2021, once again Rodgers won the MVP, but this was for his second straight season, as he also won it in 2020, but he had another efficient year with 4,100 yards, 37 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, getting more votes than wide receiver Cooper Kupp, who was the Triple Crown winner with 145 catches, 1,947 yards, and 16 touchdowns. In both cases, J.J. Watt and Cooper Kupp won Defensive Player and Offensive Player of the Year, but I do think maybe 20 years prior, they would have gotten a lot more consideration for the MVP. But now to get into this season, the current top 5 MVP odds are surprisingly, or I guess not, all quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes lead the race at plus 300 odds, followed by Lamar Jackson, Tua Tagovailoa, and Joe Burrow. You go further down the list and we see our first non-quarterback in Christian McCaffrey, and then another 6 quarterbacks are listed before we reach the 2 best wide receivers in football in Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown. You then have to go through 2 more quarterbacks, even journeyman Joshua Dobbs, before the first defensive player on the list in Micah Parsons. So it's clear once again that a quarterback is likely to win the award this year, which when you break down the numbers, I don't necessarily agree with. Jalen Hurts, who is leading the race, has had a good season. He's completing 69% of his passes for 2,300 yards, 15 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, along with 300 yards on the ground, 7 touchdowns, and 2 fumbles. So when you combine all those numbers, Hurts has 2,600 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 11 turnovers. And even watching Hurts this year, the eye test hasn't exactly been great either. So personally, I don't think Hurts is having an MVP caliber season. Yet since he has pretty good numbers on the best team in the league, he's practically the favorite of the award by default, which I think is wrong. Patrick Mahomes, who was next on the list, is pretty similar to Hurts, as in he's having a good season, but an MVP year, I don't really see it. He's completing 68% of his passes for 2,700 total yards, 17 touchdowns to 10 turnovers. I believe Mahomes has substantially less talent around him compared to Hurts, but again, a good season, but to be number 2 in the MVP ranking at this point in the season just seems far-fetched. And quickly to round out the top 4 favorites, we have Lamar Jackson and Tua Tagovailoa. Lamar has 2,600 total yards, 15 total touchdowns to 11 turnovers, while Tua himself has 2,600 total yards, 19 touchdowns to 9 turnovers. So objectively speaking, which one of these quarterbacks is really standing out at the moment? Jalen Hurts and Tua, statistically speaking, have the best numbers, but also have the best supporting cast on offense according to most NFL fans. And that's a good segue into the 2 wide receivers who I think should be getting serious consideration for the award in Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown. Starting first with Tyreek Hill, he was talking all offseason on how he's going to go for 2,000 yards this year and put together the best season for a wide receiver of all time. And so far his comments haven't been outlandish, as Tyreek is currently on pace for 2,032 yards through the halfway point. After 9 games, he has 69 catches for 1,076 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's tied for 3rd in the league in catches, but will most likely catch TJ Hawkinson and Stephon Diggs, who have played an extra game. He's number 1 in yards, and he's number 1 in touchdowns. touchdowns. So combining that with his 2,000 yards he's on pace for, he's also working towards 130 catches and 15 touchdowns. So if Tyreek does break the NFL receiving yards record, albeit with an extra game, but also has 130 catches and 15 touchdowns, how could he not get consideration for the award? Especially if we were following the previous theme of historic seasons for a non-quarterback, winning them the MVP. And all the numbers I just spouted out about Tyreek Hill aren't too off the mark for AJ Brown either. Through 9 games for him, he has 67 catches for 1,005 yards and 6 touchdowns, which will put him on pace for 126 catches, 1,900 yards, and 11 touchdowns on the season. And it's kind of crazy that Brown is on that pace after starting the first 2 weeks off with only 11 catches for 108 yards, but he had a historic streak of 125 plus receiving yards in 6 straight games to put him right back on pace for a ridiculous season. The other skill position player that's having a great season that I want to mention is 49ers running back Christian McCaffrey. He's been the workhorse and basically the engine of the Niners offense, and he's on pace for 1,400 rushing yards, 640 receiving yards, and 24 touchdowns. So if the 49ers go on a crazy winning streak to end the season like they have the past couple of years, and CMC stays at his current pace, why can't he even be in consideration for the award as well? Over 2,000 total yards, over 20 touchdowns. That's not something that you see from a player every single year in the NFL. And the last player I want to shout out that's actually not on the offensive side of the ball and is also not getting any hype for this award is none other than pass rusher Myles Garrett. Garrett has 9 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, 20 quarterback hits, 28 total tackles, and 4 forced fumbles. He's the main reason why this Browns defense has jumped from the number 19th scoring defense in 2022 to the number 6 scoring defense this season. Obviously, hiring new defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz has helped, and getting another viable pass rusher in Zadarius Smith has helped take some pressure off of him, but he's really taken his game to another level this year and has single-handedly won the Browns at least 2 games this year. So with Deshaun Watson now out for the season with his shoulder injury, and the Browns defense likely having to carry this team into the postseason now, if they do make the playoffs and Myles Garrett continues at his pace of 21 sacks and 8 forced fumbles, I also think he should be in consideration for the award as well. But in the end, with no quarterback really standing out among the rest this year, and a handful of skill position players and a pass rusher having borderline historic seasons, the conversation really should shift to taking other positions more seriously when it comes to winning the MVP award. But do I anticipate one of these non-quarterbacks winning it this year? No, not really. I think the time has come where the MVP has essentially turned into the Heisman Trophy of college football, where it's pretty much strictly a quarterback award. And particularly this year, that sucks more than usual because 2 of Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, and CMC are not going to get any recognition for their season, as there's only one Offensive Player of the Year award. And when it's all said and done this year, I think all 3 would be more than qualified to take that award home. But the reluctantness to give the MVP to one of those skill guys means a 1,900-yard season might get lost in the shuffle. And that's really my take on the NFL MVP award and why this year's race is a bit different than recent years, yet the outcome is likely to stay the same. But I want to know who you think should win the MVP this year and why. Do you think it's right for the award to go to the quarterback on the best team by default, or should someone like Tyreek Hill win it if he does indeed have a historic season? But thank you guys so much for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and as always, I will catch you guys in my next one.